and participate in this quick survey. Now, so three criteria that you're three criteria for selecting the one. Yeah. Sige na, do not be shy. This is a purely anonymous activity, so hindi natin to isisend kahit kanino. So when you key in your answers, hindi ma-associate sa inyo. Values, intellect, personality, empathy, compatibility, vibe, wholesomeness, okay, wealth or rich, intellect, nakita ko medyo malaking values, sense of humor, yung pagiging understanding, yeah, someone who gets me, wow, mayaman, marami yung may mayaman, may rich din, open-minded, self-aware, self-awareness, long-term vision, wow, music taste, kailangan kaparehas ng music taste, common ground of interest, always there for you, fun to be with, loyalty, okay, yeah, meron pa bang habol? There are 28 responses now. Tanungin natin si Sir Ashton, siya naman, ano yung three criteria niya. Sir Ashton. Yeah, si Sir Ash.
Sa kabilang meeting ako po. Shaking table.
Oh, okay.
Pero gusto ko, sir, yung funny. Funny, saka, pwede ba yung rich?
Criteria mo naman yun, sir. Hindi na pwede pakialam. Thank you, sir. Si Sir Justin naman.
May sharing bigla dito. Pero, I think yung isa sa mga tinitingnan ko yung dependable person. Hindi
okay.
naman, I mean, pwede kang can depend on him, on the other person, and the other person can depend on you as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sir Justin. Ayan. Okay, so thank you for sharing your criteria. Ako naman I very much agree dun sa sa values, and sa personality and sa intellect. Very very important yung shared values and vision. And also, syempre, important yung beauty, no? I'd say napakaganda ng wife ko. Nakikinig siya dito sa likod. Ayun. So, syempre important 'yun, 'di ba? Para maganda din yung mga anak niyo. All right. So, and sabi nila yung yung intellect daw na mamana sa mom. So important yung intellect. Ayan. All right. So, bakit natin pinag-uusapan nito ngayon? This is very much related to our second part of the lesson, which is about, teka lang, our second lesson is about multi-attributed or multi-criteria decision analysis, no? Or multi-attribute decision making. It's very important that we know a systematic way to process multi-criteria decisions, because actually in almost all our decisions it will entail different multiple considerations, most of which are conflicting, di ba? Di ba? Tama? So paano yung gagawin mo kung kunyari pogi pero hindi rich, pero yun yung dalawang criteria mo, di ba? How do you strike the balance between between the two, or rich pero kasama sa ano mo yung intellect pero hindi masyado, parang so-so lang o medyo slow ganyan. So it's important that you're able to process how do you strike a balance, or how do you give weight for one and another, no? And how do you eventually come up with a decision? And with most engineering decisions, ganun din, no? Most engineering decisions are almost never one-dimensional. And while it is very much, it's very easy to dismiss that for businessmen or companies, considerations are solely monetary. In fact, they do involve a lot of different considerations. Some of the things that we some of the things that figure into our decision-making process are dimensions that we put value into. No? So economic, aesthetic, moral, social, political, even religious. No? And how each of these figure in our decision varies in terms of degree, dependent din dun sa ating perspectives, values, and upbringing. No? So yun. Kaya given two options and the same set of attributes that you'll be evaluated against, people may have different results pa rin, diba? So aside from cash flows with engineering projects, we also consider aesthetics, we consider environmental and social impact, and oftentimes, no, conflicting ito. So for instance, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the project of Kaliwa Dam. Sino sa atin yung familiar? Familiar kayo, can I have a show of hands? Sa familiar sa Kaliwa Dam project? Mukhang walang masyado, no? So just to give you a brief background on Kaliwa Dam project. So it's actually a dam project to be built on the Sierra Madre Mountain range. No? So it's supposed to impound water so that we'll have an additional water source for Metro Manila and Rizal. That's one. And it's also supposed to help in controlling flood by preventing runoff from going from the Sierra Madre pababa dito sa mga low-lying areas of Laguna, Rizal, and parts of Metro Manila. Now, so are there benefits to the project? Yes, kasi nga, yun yung primary intention niya, no? Water supply, flood control. However, we also have to consider na dahil itatayo siya dito sa Sierra Madre Mountain Range, a bulk of that area are part of the ancestral domains of Dumagat and Remontado na tribes. No? So, a big part of their lands would be submerged kapag nagtayo tayo ng dam kasi ma-hold mo yung water upstream. No? At the same time, you'll also inundate much of the virgin tropical rainforest dun sa area. So you see, meron tayong conflicting interests. How do we go about deciding whether or not this project is or should be pursued? No, considering what I told you, or considering yung mga alam natin about the project, can I get a heart react kung sino yung in favor of pursuing the project? And can I get, meron ba tayong sad react? Let me just check kung ano yung mga reactions available. Wala pala tayong sad react. No? Can I get an X kung kung tingin natin the project should not be pursued? Ayan, so I noticed that a lot of you do not think the project should be pursued, but NWRB and also MWSS approved this project. So the technical evaluators actually think that the project merit outweighs the cost. No, so I think it speaks about how much we put value into the different facets of the decision problem. Sadly, no, na medyo, yun nga, na put into the back burner yung some important interests. Similarly, we have an ongoing construction of an international airport in Bulacan. No? And the site of that is at the mouth of the delta of Intaliptip, the delta of Marilao-Mikawayan River. So there are a lot of oppositions to the project because that area is a mangrove area, it's supposed to be a protected area. And so kaya yung Pamalakaya is a group of fisher folk, they oppose it because a lot of them derive their livelihood from the area. So kapag ma-wipe out yung mangroves. At the same time, let me tell you, in my involvement as part of the flood management team ng Quezon City government, we've been seeing yung mga dating hindi binabang areas in the northern part of Quezon City, which is part of the Marilao River watershed. No? Ngayon, nagkaka-experience sila ng baha, and it's likely because of the reclamation in the area. So it's important that we consider all concerns, all all possible aspects of the decision problem. Now, with multi-criteria decision analysis or multi-attribute decision making, so basically ang gusto natin, una, is to select the best among a set of options, which we call alternatives, evaluating them against a set of criteria considering of multiple attributes. So just to define some terms, decision maker, so siya yung gumagawa, of course, ng decision. The objective is the problem that we wish to solve. The attribute or criteria are basically the set of parameters that we will evaluate each of our options against. And yung mga alternatives natin, basically yung mga options natin or yung mga possible solutions to the problem, possible na maka-address sa objectives natin. With multi-criteria decision process or multi-attribute decision process, so attributes are the criteria that we consider, and the values define how we score each alternative and each attributes. Sabi natin attributes, ito yung criteria natin. Kasi if you check out a beauty contest, kunyari, meron siya, di ba, iba-ibang set of criteria, ganyan. O kaya mga iba-ibang pa-contest, may criteria yan. O even actually sa pagpili ng best person for the job, so skills, pleasing personality, kaya etc. So these are attributes that you use to make a decision. So there are attributes that may have numerical values, like say costs for engineering projects. No, costs have numerical value. Lifespan would have numerical value. There are also attributes that have categorical value, usually non-numerical, and hindi siya laid on a spectrum. No, say color, ganyan. So, paano natin ilalagay on the spectrum yung blue, red, white? So, these are basically just categorical or good, fair, poor na pwedeng categorical pero nasa spectrum siya. Now, what are our considerations in choosing or selecting attributes or criteria? Number one, operationality. So, all attributes should be measurable against an attribute. Okay? So, lahat dapat ng attributes na yun, kaya nating evaluate, or lahat ng alternatives could be evaluated for a given attribute. And that the value differences dun sa attribute na yun distinguishes at least two alternatives. No? If an attribute doesn't distinguish across alternatives, then we shouldn't be using that as a metric na hindi na natin siya kailangang isama sa decision problem. Alright? Next. Uniqueness, no? So each attribute captures a unique dimension of the decision problem and are not redundant or overlapping with other attributes. So a good decision process would have thought of how do we ensure that the attributes that we consider doesn't double count or do not double count or does not overlap. No? So yun, makikita natin some attributes, for instance, let's say proximity to kunyari when we're choosing yung first job mo after graduation, we talk about proximity from home versus yung cost of traveling, no? So they may be pertaining to the same thing, so you can probably collapse the two, or merge the two into one. Yeah. Third is completeness. So we need to ensure that all relevant criteria are considered in the analysis, and we must balance it against the length of analysis. No? So yes, it is important to consider all the factors or all the attributes that matter, pero hindi naman pwede mag-evaluate tayo across 100 attributes. No? So we need to also balance it against the length and the tediousness of the analysis. So important, magandang ma-bring up dito at this point yung Pareto principle, which tells us na actually 80% of the results stem from the effect of 20% of the inputs. No? So baka ganun, pwede natin i-truncate yung mga top 20% of the attributes and we use that to evaluate. Alright? Now, ang mga multi-attributed na mga decisions can be decided on using compensatory models or non-compensatory models. Now, with compensatory model, ang root word nito is compensate. No? So, pag compensatory model, ibig sabihin, for one lacks sa isang attribute, pwede siya mag-make up for it in another attribute and cancel out lang niya. So difference in a particular attribute may be traded off or offset against differences in another attribute. And this enables us to collapse all the attribute in a single dimension. So pwede nating i-reduce, pag compensatory model natin, we can reduce it into a single dimension analysis. With non-compensatory model naman, we tend to retain the individuality of the attributes during the selection of the most preferable alternatives. And we don't use trade-offs in the analysis, no, or in analyzing for the best alternative. Unahin natin yung non-compensatory model. Alright, so meron tayong 4 types, no? Dominance. So let's say between two alternatives, one is obviously inferior than another. Okay? So when we have the dominance model, inaalis natin yung mga alternatives that is already fully dominated across all attributes ng isa pang alternative. Alright? So let's say alternative A, mas mura at saka mas masarap. Ganyan. Kaya sa pagkain. Tapos alternative B, mahal na nga, hindi pa masarap. So it's obvious for us na alternative A is already a lot better than alternative B. So we eliminate alternative B from consideration. So ganun yung dominance. We eliminate all inferior alternatives. When we say inferior alternatives, kapag talo siya dun sa lahat ng criteria natin or lahat ng attributes natin. Alright? So that's dominance model. Satisficing model naman, we set allowable or feasible ranges for every criteria that we have. For instance, cost. Meron tayong maximum cost. So hanggang dito lang yung pwede kong gastusin. Yan. Kunyari, speed, no? Kailangan at least 20 units per day yung kaya niyang ma-produce. O at least kaya naman yung tumakbo ng 80 kilometers per hour kung sasakyan. No? So yun. So we establish acceptable range of values for every attribute. Tapos titignan natin, so yung bawat alternative mo, kunyari meron kang 10 options, lahat sila, pag ni-screen mo sila doon, dapat papasa sila doon sa range na sinet mo. So if they fail on one, you eliminate them outright. No? So, yun yung sinasabi natin sa satisficing. Para pumasa siya to the next level of screening, then it has to pass all the feasible ranges that you set. Is that clear? Kung clear yun, can I get a thumbs up? Or yung iba ina-absorb pa? Ayan, mukhang clear naman to almost everyone. Right. Ngayon, ano yung disjunctive resolution? Disjunctive resolution is very similar to satisficing. So meron kang acceptable range, pero instead, mas strict yung satisficing. Sa satisficing, kailangan mo ipasa lahat. No? Sa disjunctive resolution, for as long as an alternative passes sa isang attribute mo, then you still retain it for subsequent analysis. No? So yun yung ginagawa natin sa disjunctive resolution. Again, ang difference niya, with satisficing, an alternative needs to hurdle all the attributes. Sa disjunctive resolution, for as long as acceptable naman siya, pasok siya sa cost ko. So kahit na medyo hindi okay yung hindi niya naabot yung gusto kong speed, okay pa rin. Consider ko pa rin siya for the next set of analysis. So that's disjunctive resolution. So next naman, lexicography. Sa lexicography, basically, tinitingnan natin isa-isa yung mga attributes that we are using, no, to compare them or to select the best alternative. So, una, we identify the attribute that is most important to us. So, yun yung ginagawa natin sa lexicography. And with that attribute, we check, ano yung best alternative if I consider this a most important attribute. Ngayon kung may tie, we evaluate them using the next most important attribute to us. Okay? So ganun siya. Kung may tie pa rin, then we use the third most important attribute hanggang may isa kang matira. Now note that non-compensatory models may or may not give you a final singular decision. In most cases, you would only use them to narrow down your selection to a few. Kasi mahirap gawan ng thorough economic analysis lahat. And so normally, ina-narrow down natin siya through any of these non-compensatory models. Alright? So, ayun yung for sample ng non-compensatory models. For compensatory models naman, so typically, we convert them into a common unit of measurement, which is either monetary, in pesos, dollars, or in utils. No? A util is a dimensionless unit of usefulness. Para madaling maalala, sa kanya nanggaling yung term na utility. No? And yung inutil. No? Yung, diba? Pag in util, wala siyang worth, wala siyang value. Yung utility, ibig sabihin yun yung parang usefulness niya. So, some examples of compensatory models include yung SMART or the simple multi-attribute weighting technique, the MAUT or the multi-attribute utility technique, other more advanced na mga tools that we use, analytical hierarchy process or analytical network process. For CE22, we'll only discuss yung first one, yung SMART or the simple multi-attribute rating technique. And so while MAUT is the most scientific approach kasi we rely on statistical analysis of previous performances to derive a utility function, yung SMART naman is a simplified version which is an experience-based approach in criteria or in assigning criteria weights. So with SMART, how do we define criteria weights? Una, we list all relevant criteria and we write them in order of decreasing importance. We can note that some of the attributes may be equally important. Now, using a scale of 0 to 100 or 0 to 10, we assign the maximum score to the most important attribute, then I assign scores to the rest considering their relative importance. Again, note that some of the attributes may be equally important, so pwede natin silang bigyan ng the same number. Then finally, we normalize by dividing everything by the total. How do we evaluate? Once we have the weights, determine how the alternatives measure against each attribute. And then we should be able to get a single numeric score for an alternative which may serve as our decision basis. So kunyari, let's have this example. So meron tayong tatlong options, no, for an equipment that we'll use for the capping of bottles. Meron din tatlong bagay na important to us, yung cost, yung safety, and yung speed, no, in terms of the throughput rate. And nag-usap-usap yung mga operations manager na, well, cost and safety are both very important and they're more important than speed. So sabi natin, tinignan natin, yung cost, we give a score of 100. Yung safety, we give a weight of 100. And then speed, we give a weight of 50. So if we total that, that's 250. So we divide each of these number by 250. That will give us yung weight natin, no? So note na may certain level of subjectivity dito. We have to ask yung experts kung ilang score yung ibibigay niya. No? So that's how we systematically do this. No? So the normalized weight would be 40, 40, and 20% respectively. Now, how do we assign scores and eventually evaluate, no, for instance yung ano natin, tatlong equipment na pinagpipilian natin, alpha, beta, and gamma. Say for safety, walang exact na measure of probability of an accident, but there's a safety seal na may A rating at may B rating. So alpha is a B-rated equipment while beta and gamma options are both A-rated. For the speed, ganitong karaming kaya na lang i-process in an hour. No? So alpha can process 80 units, can cap 80 bottles per hour. Beta can cap 96 bottles per hour. And then gamma can cap 100 units per hour. No? And finally, the cost is 25 million, 32 million, and 35 million respectively. How do we assign scores? No, so when values are categorical or non-numeric, we assign points in terms of preference. When values are numeric and higher is preferred, so ang ginagawa natin, we assign 100 points dun sa highest, we assign 0 to the lowest, and then we scale the intermediate values. Alternatively, we can assign yung 0 to 100 for feasible ranges. No? So, hindi necessarily naka-coincident siya with the best and the worst na value dun sa selection natin, but dun sa feasible range that we set. Tapos i-scale natin yung scores nung iba dahil nasa gitna naman sila. Next, when values are numeric and lower is preferred, babalik na rin lang natin, no? So we give 100 to the lowest, 0 to the highest, and then we scale the intermediate values. Alternatively, ganun din, no? We can assign 0 and 100 to the feasible range bounds. So ito yung example natin. So sa safety, yung B-rated would, of course, prefer natin A-rated, no? So maganda. Tapos, so we give that 100 and then B-rated would be given a 0. Tapos, dito naman sa speed, preferred natin sa speed is of course higher. Gusto natin mas mabilis. No? So, bibigyan natin 100, itong si gamma. Tapos, yung pinakamabagal, which is alpha, we give it a 0. Tapos, we just interpolate kung ano yung score ni 96, kung 0 si 80 at saka 100 si 100. No? Similarly, or in contrast, sa cost naman, mas preferred natin yung mas mura. Diba? So we give 100 to this 25 million here. Tapos 0 dun sa 35 million. And then isa-scale natin si 32 million. Nasaan siya? Sa scale. No? Kung 0 si 35 million and 100 si 25 million. Alright? So ito yon. No? So, tapos after, no, we just need to multiply the scores by the weights and then we sum them. So that gives us, no, this analysis tells us na si beta actually yung best option for us. Okay, gives us a score of 70. All right. So I guess that's all for our lesson on multi-attribute decision analysis. At this point, are there questions? Okay, kung wala, thank you very much for listening.